This is TWiT.
There are things that makes no sense to have a community.
Yeah, and
what is it? Does it need passionate users?
So I think there's a few things to consider. And imagine this is with a company. I mean, it's different for if you're setting up like a hobbyist community. There's a different set of considerations. But imagine this is a company who wants to build a community around their product. The first thing is there's got to be an audience that cares about your product. There's got to be a group of people who
have to really care.
Yeah, there's somebody has to care. Something that people are going to actually want to spend time investing in. The second thing is you've got to make sure that you can enable enough control to your community where they can do something, right? So, for example, there are some companies, particularly in heavily kind of lockdown businesses, such as, again, like financial services, where they can't take the legal risk to even set up a forum.
Right.
I mean, where each tweet goes through 10 rounds of legal review. It's very difficult to set up a community like that. Those communities tend to happen internal. So you've got to be able to say, we can enable people to come in here and shape a collaborative environment in some way.
Notoriously, companies like Apple in their forums will censor their communities.
Right.
Which I think has a chilling effect a little bit on that community.
I think you should only ever remove or censor. I don't think you should censor content. I think you should remove it.
If it's critical of the company.
Well, my view is this. The time when you remove content or you remove people is when the safety of your members is called into question, such as, or there is hateful,
and that's imperative because it could really degenerate.
Or there's hateful content.
Yeah.
There's sexism, racism.
But if somebody says, I don't like the Apple Watch because it's not always on,
you should never.
You can't take that out.
No, you can't. Because the thing is that if you do that, it completely undermines the objectivity of the environment that you're building.
Well, and also you want to build a community where people feel like they're participating and their participation is welcome.
Well, and a key element of this is, kind of going back to what should you put in place when you set up that community environment, whether it's on a social media network, whether it's in a forum or whatever it might be. The communities that build the most momentum and respect are where the members feel like they can have a critical conversation with the company, and the company will engage, right? This is one of the things I've always tried to do with communities that I've been involved in, is to say to our community, we want your feedback. We're not going to get better if we only hear the chorus of people who love what we do.
Right.
And there is a difference, of course, between constructive feedback and just complaining. And I would always want to encourage the community to be able to express their feedback, if it's critical, in a constructive way. Not everyone's very good at that, right? And you can't expect that in all scenarios. But if you've got people who are complaining about your product and it's reasonable feedback, engage with them and saying, you know what? Here's the thing. You're right.
Right.
You know what? We can do a better job here. And even though if your feedback was inelegantly presented, we've taken this and we're having a conversation about this and we're going to make these adjustments. Outside of communities, that delivers an incredibly meaningful experience to your customers.
Yeah.
Because a lot of companies will do what they'll do. They'll batten down the hatches and say, well, we're going to ignore that. They're just a bunch of wackos on the internet. And they'll ignore that, and they'll think that they have the higher path.
This is exactly why so many companies, though, don't want to start communities. They don't want to. They do already think there's it's wackos on the internet.
And that's one of the reasons why I think the architecture of how you design your community is important, because you want to basically facilitate the right. First of all, an environment that's going to be safe and productive as you can, and that's why you need good leadership, you need a code of conduct, you need good principles in place. But then the kind of activity that you'll get there is entirely going to be calibrated to the kind of discussion that people see. If you go to a typical community and you see generally good discussion, generally positive discussion, you won't get a lot of instances like that. But you'll go to some communities where the point is trolling.
Yeah.
Places like 4chan, right? The point is trolling, is anonymous trolling. So what do? You get a load of anonymous trolling.
Right.
So much of this is when you start your community, in the same way that if I invite a bunch of people over to my house for a party, there's just a social environment that people are going to adapt to in some way. They're going to know that, there's certain things that you don't talk about, there's certain jokes you're not going to make, or it's all dependent on the environment that you're in.
So this is kind of something that comes up in our own community, our chat room. One of the things I've made many mistakes I've made them all with the chat room.
I've made none.
None, amazing.
Just kidding.
One of the things we ended up doing is saying that the chat room, we provide the server, but it's a community-run enterprise, and they make the rules. The moderators come from the community.
Yeah.
But the challenge, and I don't tell them I don't want to hear critical stuff. That's
right.
I don't say that. But there's a fine line, because it's very easy for a community to tilt into one big mass critique.
Yes.
And then it's hard to be positive.
Right.
So and I let the moderators do this. I think they do actually a very good job of balancing. They allow a certain amount of critical stuff, but if somebody just comes in there and it's just like very negative. Now a chat room is a very different weird community because it's live. It's in real time.
Right.
So, and nothing lives, it scrolls off.
Right, yeah, there's like a short-term memory piece to
it is a weird kind of community. It's not like a forum or other kind of more traditional communities. But I think over time, it's reached a kind of a nice stasis.
Yeah. Well, and I think an element of this is, and one of the reasons why, the skill here really is sifting the signal from the noise.
Yeah.
Right? So there's always going to be whining and complaining in any community, in any human group. The key thing is, I think, when you have a group of people and they feel like no matter what they talk about, no matter how they express their feedback, it's never listened to, it's never internalized in any shape or form. What will happen is you'll get a sense, it'll turn into just complaining, more and more complaining. Because they'll be of the view like, they're not listening to us anyway.
It doesn't matter what I say.
So it becomes a therapy session for the community.
Oh, that's interesting.
But to me, when what happens is let's say it's a company and a community, if the company basically is regularly saying, look, we've received some of this feedback, we think some of this is really legitimate, we're evaluating it, and we've made a series of changes based upon it. And it's not just reactive to that storm that's occurring there at that moment, but it's proactive in saying, we want to have a regular engagement. Like one of the things I always recommend to clients is, when you identify your community members who've kind of earned their way through good work and contribution, don't wait for them to provide feedback to you. Reach out to them.
Yeah.
Even if it's once a quarter, just hop on a quick call with them. Regularly survey your community members.
Do you give them a title? Do you honor them or recognize them in some external way?
I think it's good to do that, because communities broadly have like 3 phases when people join. I refer to it, and again, this is in People Powered, I refer to it as, first of all, you're a casual participant. So you show up occasionally, from time to time. A lot of people in your chat channel will do this. And then you'll have regulars, people who are there a lot, most weeks. And then you'll have a small group who are just super passionate about what your community is doing. And I think it's always good to identify in whatever method of contribution, whether it's people writing code, or whether it's people participating in a chat channel or something else, how those groups are broken down. And then as people participate more and more, you want them to have a sense that they have a closer relationship with your overall community leadership.
A reward of some kind.
So I'll give you an example. One client that I used to work with is a security company. And when people had contributed a certain amount to this platform, we'd start reaching out to them and sending them some swag, inviting them to some events. They got to go to some hackathons. And there was like an upper echelon of this company of like the top 20 security researchers. And we added them to a group called the Most Valuable Hackers. And they, for example, would have an email address set up that would go straight to the executive team. They didn't really use it very often.
Wow.
But it was a very clear statement of, we genuinely care about what you think about what we're doing here. And they would be regularly involved in discussions with the company. So I think differentiating that is really important. The critical thing is you have to have an environment where everybody has an opportunity to succeed there.
Yeah, because you don't want to create a clique.
No.
Or an upper, I mean, if this is where, authoritarianism, you give people certain titles.
Right.
Suddenly they misuse them.
Right. Exactly. And the thing is as well, is this is why I think it's got to be earned as best you can based on merit.
Yeah.
But the tricky thing is, there was, for example, for a number of years, meritocracy was a term thrown around a lot in open source. The idea that you build your reputation based upon the work that you do.
Doesn't matter if you're a woman, doesn't matter if you're a person of color, doesn't matter.
Exactly.
A kid.
And that was a great theory. But what we've learned more and more in recent years is the reality of that is that it's not actually the reality of that in many ways. Because if, for example, you are a woman or a person of color and you join an open source community, you're probably going to have a bit of a different experience to a lot of men. So meritocracy to me is a good North Star. It's like, rewarding people based upon good contributions is good, but being aware of the fact that people are going to have very different experiences based upon who they are, where they come from.
Yeah.
Like if you're a white guy in California joining a tech community, you're already going to have a very different experience than if you are, you know, somebody who's based in a different country or comes from a different background or whatever it might be, or a different gender. So I think we need to be mindful of our differences, but design an environment where you can reward people for their for great work. So